Built to last. Hey, Life Center Young Adults, so good to be with you here tonight. Yeah, hey, can we applaud our media team? They did a really good job with that, man. That's kind of a fun little deal there. My son watched that video this morning, and he was pumped out of his mind. Hey, so good to be with you here tonight. If you have your Bibles, go ahead, turn them to the book of Matthew, chapter 7. We're going to look there in just a moment. It'll be on the screens here in a few minutes if you don't have a Bible, Matthew, chapter 7. Before we get there, though, do want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. You heard Josiah and Hannah talk a little bit about it, but we are switching up the rhythm of our gatherings real soon. And so I just want to make sure that you are aware. Next Sunday night, again, will be our final Sunday night gathering, but as they said, community lives on. And so we're just going to continue to gather at some other times. You can see that calendar. Everybody should have got one on the way in. We're just going to move some stuff to Tuesday nights and to some Thursday night stuff with our Life Skills Summer Sessions class. It'll be a whole lot of fun, all right? So make sure that you check that out. Get signed up for our newsletter. Maybe you got an email about that this week. Matthew chapter 7, if you are there, we're going to read this together. We're kicking off a series tonight entitled Built to Last. And this is kind of a fun little series that we're going to look at for the next few weeks. And I love what Jesus says here about this idea of building something that lasts. He says this in Matthew 7, verse 24. He says, "Everyone then who hears these words," touch the person next to you, say, "Hear these words, and does them. This person will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock." Maybe you grew up in Sunday school and you've heard this song before. "The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew, and they beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine but does not do them," touch the person next to you and say, "Not." "Everyone who hears them but does not do them, he will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. When the rain fell and the floods came, the winds blew and beat against that house. It fell, splat," the song goes, "and great was the fall because of it." I love the distinction that Jesus makes here in Matthew 7. The difference between someone who merely hears instruction and the difference between someone who implements instruction. We see in the book of James, we are called not just to be hearers of the word, but doers also. Otherwise, we deceive ourselves. We're like a man who looks at his face in a mirror and forgets what he looks like. Jesus uses this phrase all throughout the Gospels. He says, "He who has ears, let him hear." It's this colloquialism. It's this weird Jewish phrase that simply just means if you're going to hear it, you need to put it into action. You need to be about it. And I love that Jesus says that those who hear my instruction and build their life upon my word, my will, and my ways, they're like a man who builds his house upon a rock. When trials come, when hardships come, they will withstand the test of time. But those who hear my instruction and let it go in one ear and out the other, those who fail to implement the instruction that God has given us in his blueprints for how to build something that lasts, they're like a man who builds it on the sand. And for the next few weeks in this Built to Last series, I'm excited because we're going to look at a handful of different ways that our faith can help us build something that lasts, ways that we can build friendships that will stand the test of time, ways that we can build our families in such a way so that they can withstand some hardships, some hurts, and some variety and some changes, ways in which that we can build our finances in a way so that we are taken care of, so that we have stored up in us, so that our needs are met, but also so that, I love what Josiah shared, also so that we can be a blessing and we can be generous to those around us. I'm really excited to look at how we can build these three things to last. But before we can get there, before we can start to build the walls of our spiritual home in a way that will last, we have to first establish an appropriate foundation from which to build upon. See, before we can get there, we have to learn how to build things the right way, and we have to learn how to build things Jesus's way. I grew up in a construction worker's home. My dad's name is Bob. He is a builder. The jokes wrote themselves when I was a little boy. My dad's owned his own construction company, I think, for 37 and a half years. He's awesome. And I remember as a little boy, I would tag along with him to job sites all the time. And we would go and we would look at some weird stuff going on in people's homes. Maybe you didn't grow up in a construction home, but maybe you have access to a TV and you've seen the show Fixer Upper. Anybody? Show of hands. You've seen Fixer Upper? Yeah, Chip Gaines is my boy. Or maybe you saw Love It or List It, or Flip or Flop, which wasn't so good, right? You've seen these shows, and they all basically have the exact same premise. There's a couple. She is an Instagram influencer. He owns his own frozen yogurt stand. They have a budget of $900,000, and they want a 600,000 square foot house in San Francisco. It's the most improbable, unrealistic thing in the world. But somehow, with this unrealistic budget, with these jobs that should not provide for what they actually need, they find a house that is exactly what they want, and they can begin the process of renovating it and building it to last. But every show ends up going the same. They find the house, they pick it out, they pick out what they want as far as shiplap or different types of tile on the backsplash. We're remodeling our kitchen right now, in case you can't tell. And every single episode gets to this one point where Chip Gaines is pulling a piece of drywall down off the wall, and he discovers this terrible thing. And he has to call the person who purchased the house, and he says, hey, we got bad news. We found some rot. Or we found some old electricity. It's not up to code. There's something about this house. The previous owner built it in such a way that it is not, in fact, built to last. And so now, because of this error by a previous owner or by somebody else who did some faulty construction, it's going to be more costly than we initially thought it was going to be to do this project. And I saw this all the time growing up, running around to job sites with my dad. I would see so many goofy things, and I saw so many people. They had wasted so much time and so much energy and so much money building things the wrong way. Or I saw them do this. They built these magnificent, wonderful structures, but they built them upon faulty foundations. And because of this, all of the walls were helter-skelter, and the house was leaning and tipping because the foundation was not firm. Other times I would see this. I would see house projects go awry because it was clear that the people who did the work weren't following any clear plan of instruction. As a dad of a 2-year-old, I have assembled more Paw Patrol castles than I ever thought possible. And let me tell you, I have followed so many weird instructions. Instructions can be frustrating. Instructions can be confusing, especially if you buy instructions for a piece of furniture from IKEA. Then those instructions are absolutely worthless. But what I find is this. In our walk with Jesus, oftentimes instructions that he gives us, they're not unclear. Oftentimes the instructions that he gives us, they're really not that confusing. Sometimes they are, but most of the time, his instructions are quite clear. They're not confusing at all. The problem is this: the instructions he gives us are quite inconvenient. And this forces us to an ultimatum, because all of a sudden some issues that were gray areas for a long time become incredibly black and white, where we know right way to build thing and the wrong way to build a thing. We know what it would look like to follow Jesus obediently in this arena of our life. And we have a choice at that point to either follow his instruction, build things the right way, build things Jesus' way, or to rely on ourselves and build things our way. And as we look at this idea of building things correctly, I think it's funny that we tend to want to build lasting products, but we use temporary materials. We want the strength and the security that comes from a well-engineered plan, but we don't want to follow the blueprint for our life. And I think it's funny that we want an excellent finished product without the need to focus on the details that really matter. See, oftentimes, we've talked about this a little bit before, oftentimes we find people will attempt to fix their circumstance. And they try to fix circumstances that are way beyond their power or their ability to actually control. And so they expend all this energy and effort trying to make things work and make things fit, but so much of it is out of your control. And this is funny because this is so much like just trying to like fix a plumbing issue at home. Maybe you got a leak in a septic pipe somewhere. And it's like trying to solve that with a roll of duct tape. Right? You put that thing on there and you might get a moment of temporary relief where the leak stops and everything works out. But inevitably that circumstance is going to build up enough pressure that mamma jamma is going to break loose and you're going to find yourself all messy in that circumstance. It's weird that we try to fix these circumstances. It's weird that we try to do this. Oftentimes if we can't fix a circumstance, then we just try to fix our face. And we just try to play the smiley church guy. We say, I'm good, I'm doing great, and we paint a smile on. And we pretend like everything's all right on the outside, but inside we're crumbling, we're a mess because our home life is disastrous. And we got a family member we haven't talked to in years. And we don't know how we're going to get a job in this market, and we've overdrafted our bank account at least 7 times this month, but I'm going to fix my face, and I'm going to pretend that everything's okay. But this is silly because this is just like trying to paint over rot. Y'all, it might pass like a quick glance, but inevitably over time, when the wind and the waves come and the rain beats against that thing, it's going to wash the paint away. It's going to reveal what's really going on beneath the surface. Worse yet, if we don't actually fix that issue, we're going to have some structural problems later down the road. See, it's not enough to try to fix circumstances that are outside of our control. It's not enough to just attempt to fix our face and pretend like everything's okay. We need to solve a better problem. And so what if we did that together tonight? What if instead of trying to fix a circumstance and fix our face, what if we solved a more root issue, a more foundational issue? And what if tonight we fixed our focus? The title of my talk tonight is this: what we look to determines our destiny. If you're taking notes, you might want to write that down. What we look to determines our destiny. I'm learning this because I'm teaching my 2-year-old son how to ride a bicycle, and he's doing great. He's taken to it a lot quicker than I thought he would. And the other day we went riding down Ruston Way. It was really, really fun. But Ezra, he's so funny. He gets so pumped about riding this bike, and he smiles, and he's having a good time. And then he'll look up at me, and da. I'm like, son, you're doing great, but you need to look where you're going. Because we all learned this in driver's ed, right? Where you look, inevitably, is where you go, right? What we look to, this is just a natural law. What we look to, it determines our destiny. What we look to, it determines our trajectory. The thing that we focus on, inevitably, that becomes our destination. And when we look to Jesus, it's his instructions that help us create a life that's built to last. When we look to Jesus, he becomes the foundation upon which we build our lives. I love what the book of Hebrews says. The author says this in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. It says this: therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and every sin which clings so close. I love that the author differentiates between a weight that holds us back, a mere distraction, and an actual sin. They're not always the same thing. Let us lay aside those things that cling so closely and hold us back, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Then the writer says this in verse 2. I love this. Looking to, can we say it together? Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Looking to Jesus. What we look to determines our destiny. And friends, we cannot just look to Jesus once. We can't just give him a mere passing glance. There's no such thing as a spiritual photographic memory. That's not the way that this works. No, we must look to Jesus on a daily basis. That's the process of discipleship. It's referring back to the instruction manual as often as possible. We have to focus on the spiritual blueprints for our lives, because what we look to determines our destiny. And that might sound cute. That might sound tweet-worthy. That might sound clever. What we look to determines our destiny. Fix our focus. That's nice. It's an alliteration, and it almost sounds like it rhymes. So therefore, that's good advice, preacher guy. I think I can go home. The problem is this: that sounds like cute, weird jibber jabber in a church. But I don't know about you. The idea of fixing my focus and looking to Jesus in everyday life sounds like it might be a little bit harder to do than just a guy on the platform is saying. I don't really know sometimes how I'm supposed to look to Jesus in the middle of my work day, right? What do you want me to do? You want me to like take the background on my phone and turn it to a picture of Jesus? Like that's how I'm going to look to him in the middle of my everyday? No. Here's what I believe we need to do in order to look to Jesus in the midst of everyday life. I believe we just need to more appropriately change the way in which we look for him in the midst of some areas, 3 key areas that we are all looking to every single day, some of us without even realizing that we're looking there. So I want to address tonight 3 simple areas of focus, 3 areas, and I want to address a right way to look in that area and a wrong way to look in that area, a right way and a wrong way to look to Jesus in the midst of what we're going through. The first thing is this: we look to Jesus in this first area when we look behind. Can we all say behind? When we look behind, Romans 11 says this, oh, the depth and the riches and the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable are his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Who has been his counselor? Who has given a gift to him that he might be repaid? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. Paul is saying, holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. There is nothing that compares to this God that we serve. In all of creation, there is no one that he is indebted to. There is no one who has given him wise counsel. No, he is high above it all. His ways are above my ways. His thoughts above my thoughts. And then Paul says this. He says this in chapter 12, the very next verse. You've heard this verse before, I'm sure. He says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God. Another translation says, therefore, in view of what we have just read, in light of what we have just declared about this God that we serve, about who he is and what he's done for us. Therefore, in view of that, I urge you, I compel you, I'm begging you and pleading you, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. This is your spiritual act of worship. I love that Paul says, in view of all that he has done for us, now we respond. As we look behind and see the goodness of Jesus, we can now respond. I love what the book of Revelation says. The book of Revelation says it is the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony that help us to overcome. There is power in your story. There is power when you view God's mercy to you in the past. And sometimes I find that when I'm having a focus issue, I just need to slam the reset button on my faith. And I do this by reminding myself of all of the times that God has proven himself over and over and over again. See, it's through this process that I'm able to make crazy, audacious statements like we sing almost every week. You're never gonna let me down. That sounds like crazy talk. Unless you're the type of person that frequently is able to look behind and see the times where Jesus has been walking alongside you. See the times where you've missed a step, you've fallen down, and he's helped pick you back up. Look behind and see the times where he has actually picked you up and carried you through that thing that was too tough for you to get through on your own. When we look to Jesus, when we look behind, it builds our faith. Last summer, we took my son down to Disneyland. We had a great time. It was a blast. And while we were there, we went to the California Adventure Park, and Disneyland's cool. They've got all of the different areas broken down into these different like chunks of Disney stories. And so my son's favorite place for sure was Cars Land. Cars Land is based off the movie Cars, which, if you don't know, it's a movie about cars. But these cars can talk, and they have personalities. They have vibrant personalities. My son's favorite car, for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, is Mater. If you don't know who Mater is a rusty old tow truck. I spoke at our Rainier campus this morning out in Spanaway, and I tell you what, I think I saw Mater driving in on my way there. He was smoking a pack of Marlboro Reds. He had some duck blind mossy oak gear in the back. He was ready to go hunting. I saw Mater this morning. Mater has this one iconic line in the first Cars movie. The main character, Lightning McQueen, the hotshot race car, is trying to figure out how to take this one turn on the course blind. He can't really see where he needs to get to on the other side of this corner. He's having a hard time with it. And so Mater gives him some advice. He says this iconic line. He says, I don't need to know where I'm going. I just need to know where I've been. And y'all, that is terrible advice to live your life by. If you are a high school senior and you are graduating, going off to college, let me tell you, that is the worst possible advice you could ever live your life by. Don't attempt to pick a major that way. Don't attempt to like win a life partner that way. Don't tattoo that on your arm. I don't need to know where I'm going. I just need to know where I've been. Man, I wouldn't apply that to every domain of life. But I do believe this. I do believe that there is some level of truth in that statement. Because oftentimes I find this. I find that there are many moments in life where I don't know where I'm going. And I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know how the heck I'm gonna keep going. There are a lot of those moments. And oftentimes when I find myself in the moment where I don't know where I'm going, I need to slam that faith reset button. I need to remind myself of where I've been and who was next to me the whole time and what he was teaching me and what he was showing me the whole way through. See, this is why I have a thing called a faith journal. It's my prayer journal. And every couple of days, I just sit down on this thing and I write out all of the things in life that are frustrating me, that are eating me up inside. Sometimes I'll write out the things that are going really, really well. And this is such a helpful process for me to just deal with some things emotionally. It's so therapeutic for me. But also, it's great because I'm able to look back weeks later, months later, sometimes even years later. And I'm able to look at these areas of life where I was worried, I was anxious, I was at the end of myself, and God made a way of escape. He provided, He proved Himself faithful. And as I look behind and I see the faithfulness of God, my faith increases. Sometimes we just need to slam the reset button on our faith. Now, there's a right way to look behind. There's a wrong way to look behind. I'm not advocating for nostalgia, right? I'm not advocating that we look back and do this thing that the book of Proverbs says it's fools that do this. It's fools who say, remember the good old days? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about nostalgia, right? We do this thing sometimes where really, really sneaky at doing it, where we begin to romanticize a past season of life, something in yesterday's deal that wasn't really good for us, but we start to fudge some details and we start to make it better than it was. And before you know it, we end up like Lot's wife, looking back at a circumstance, a situation that was not healthy, that was sinful, that was a wreck, and when we look back to it, it ends up being our demise. I'm not advocating for nostalgia. No, we can't live in the rear view mirror. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a healthy reminder of all that He has done for you, who He has been to you. We look behind. Look to Jesus. He is the founder. He is the start of our faith. We want to fix our focus. It requires a brief history lesson on who He's been to all of the church and who He's been to us. We look behind. Next, look behind, we look beside. Somebody say beside. We look beside, right? I know some of you already know this about me, and some of maybe we haven't met, and I'm sure it's quite obvious. You guys, I did CrossFit for like 6 years of my life. That's a past tense statement, okay? I know, okay? I have a 2-year-old. Dad bod is a real thing. I used to get stopped on the street all the time, and people would tell me, man, you look like a bald Chris Hemsworth. And I'd be like, yeah, thank you, I do. That's Thor from the Avengers movies, right? The buff guy. They say, you look like bald Chris Hemsworth. I'd be like, thank you so much. Do you want an autograph? And they'd be like, no. Okay. Nowadays, after the new Avengers movie came out, my wife will stop me sometimes in the kitchen, and she'll say, babe, you looking like a bald Chris Hemsworth. If you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, spoiler alert, he puts on some weight. But I remember this thing would always happen in my CrossFit classes. I've joked about this before. There's always this moment in every dumb workout where I would just come to the absolute end of myself, right? I realized that my CrossFitness was not built to last. It was about to fail. And I would have my hands down on my knees like this, and I'm breathing hard, and I'm red in the face, and I'm ready to quit, and I'm ready to give up. And so you know what I'd do? I'd look around the room, and I'd look beside me. And I see my buddy Don standing over here. My buddy Don, who literally was like 2.5 times my age. We called him Don the OG, the old guy. And I look at Don, and Don would look at me with this salty mustache. And I wonder, man, is the old man going to quit? Is he going to tap out? This workout's getting pretty tough. And Don would look at me and he'd go, oh, okay, Don ain't going to quit. I look over to my left, and I'd see my buddy Colby. Colby just graduated college. He was a young buck, but he was kind of new at this CrossFit thing, and I was like, I had been there like 6 years, so I was invested, right? And I look at Colby, like, maybe Colby's going to quit because he's new at this, and Colby looked at me and go, okay, well, Colby's not going to quit. Well, I guess the old guy isn't going to quit. And I guess if the young guy, I've kind of got to prove myself to him. And so what would happen is when I looked beside me to the community that was around me, we encouraged and challenged each other to continue to move forward, to not give up, to hold on to hope, and to keep pressing forward. And sometimes in life, when we feel like we're being tested, we need to look beside us to the community of believers that is there with us. Now, again, there is a right way to look beside. There is a wrong way to look aside. I'm talking about community. What I am not talking about is looking beside to comparison. Because comparison is a dangerous, dangerous game. And playing the comparison game when we look beside, that is not a way that we build something to last. That is a way that we build something that just keeps up with the trends. That's how we build something that keeps up with the Joneses. But inevitably what happens is when we run that thing to its final destination and we play the comparison game, inevitably it always ends up the same. We're broke, we're bummed out, we're lonely, we have something that we didn't really want in the first place, something that doesn't last the test of time because it wasn't built to last. It was built for somebody else, and we were just obsessed with somebody else's dream. I'm not talking about comparison. No. I'm talking about looking beside you to the community of believers there with you. And I love what the book of James says in James chapter 5. He says this in James 5, verse 17. My iPad has now reset itself. We're going off script. This is great. Okay, cool. 4th time I've preached this talk this weekend. We're about to get real with each other. This is going to be fun. James 5:16 says this. He says, therefore confess your sins to one another. Ew! I don't want to do that. That sounds like a horrible idea. James, what are you talking about? You're a madman. Confess your sins to one another. And pray for one another that you might be healed. It's the prayer of a righteous person that has great power as it's working. Confess your sins one to another. Y'all know this. When James writes this, the Greek word that he uses here for sins is pretty gnarly. James isn't saying confess your tiny little faults to one another. He's not saying, come to your brother and, hey, I thought a bad thought today, and I got angry when I was driving down the road, and I said a bad word when I stubbed my toe this morning, and so I'd just like some prayer, and I'd like to confess this to you, brother or sister. Now, that's not what James is talking about here. When James says the word sins, he actually uses this Greek word, hamartia. Could you say hamartia? Yeah, that's not like a dish at your favorite restaurant. That's not what that is, okay? A hamartia is this. Hamartia is a Greek word that we see all throughout literature in ancient Greek writings. Hamartia is this. It is a tragic character flaw in the protagonist of a story. And oftentimes it is the hamartia, that major character defect that leads to their ultimate downfall. We've all seen a hamartia before if you've seen the movie Troy, or you've at least heard the term, oh, that's my Achilles heel, right? There's a story about this guy. His name is Achilles. He's this great warrior, and he's supposed to lead a conquest against this city, and he almost does it, but right before the battle is won, he has this open spot in his armor at his Achilles heel, at his leg, and someone shoots an arrow, and he ends up losing his life and not fulfilling the destiny that he had declared over his life because of this Achilles heel. It was his hamartia. It was his ultimate downfall, and it made his life a tragedy. And what James is calling for here is some radical vulnerability for us to confess our most tragic downfall, our most fatal flaw to one another. That thing that if we don't deal with it, and if we try to continue to cover it up and allow it to live in the shadows, it will be the thing that brings about our demise. It will be the thing that people talk about for generations. Yeah, remember that guy? Yeah, but he had that thing, that hamartia. It's the ugly, deep, dark thing. And what James is calling for here is radical vulnerability by one party, and radical grace and understanding by another. And in doing this, a community of believers can come together. We can pray for each other, encourage each other, and we can process some things out. And if this is not a beautiful representation, a beautiful image of our relationship with Jesus, I do not know what is, because we come to him completely vulnerable. You could try to hide things from him. Good luck with that. We come to him completely vulnerable, and when we confess to him, he meets us with radical grace and radical understanding that we don't deserve, that we couldn't earn. And he restores us, and we're reconciled back to him. We look to Jesus when we look behind. We see his faithfulness. We look to Jesus when we look for the Jesus and other people in our faith community. People who are older than us, people who are younger than us, people who come from maybe a bit of a different background than us. We look for Jesus in this community of believers, in the ecclesia. And then finally, we look to Jesus. We fix our focus on him. In this final area, we look behind, we look beside, and we look beyond. Nick, you and the team can come. We look beyond. I love what Hebrews said there in verse 2. It said, run the race with endurance. We look to Jesus, the founder, the perfecter of our faith. And then it says this line, it says, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. He despised the shame. For the joy that was set beyond the trial in front of him, he was able to carry through. See, I love that when we look to Jesus, we find the strength all of a sudden to look beyond our circumstance. There's an old song we sang in church growing up. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. I love the theology behind this song. Because it doesn't say that when we look to Jesus, when we turn our eyes on Jesus, all of our circumstances magically get better overnight. Doesn't mean that everything suddenly works itself out and we just get to hang out and do whatever. No. In fact, what it says is that when we look to Jesus, those things might actually stay there. But the things of earth, they grow strangely dim. Because we've now set our eyes on something infinitely more beautiful, infinitely more worthy of our thought life, infinitely better. When we look to Jesus, we look beyond the circumstance, beyond the trial. And when we look to Jesus, we then find that we begin to look like Jesus. We look in the same way that Jesus looked. And we adopt his same perspective that says, Father, not my will be done, but yours. This should radically change the ways in which we build some of the spiritual walls around our home to last. Looking to Jesus and looking like Jesus, saying not my will be done, but yours be done, that should radically change the way in which I establish and manage my friendships. It should radically change the way that I lead my family. That's going to completely wreck the way in which I manage and steward my finances. When we look to Jesus, we adopt his perspective and we look beyond this circumstance to the ultimate end goal. And I wonder if there are some people here tonight who maybe you've been building life on all of the wrong things and all of the wrong ways. And maybe you're here tonight and you say, I'm fed up with doing life this way, and I'm ready to build life the right way. I'm ready to look the way that Jesus looked, to the things that he looked. Would you stand to your feet tonight? We're going to go back into this song here real quick. I love that song, Build My Life. We're going to sing that bridge again. But can we do this? Can we just take a moment to, again, surrender all that we are to him and invite him in to deal with some of the foundational issues, some of our focus problems? And can we begin to put our trust in Jesus, the author, the finisher of our faith? Can we begin to put our trust in Jesus, the way? Put our trust in Jesus, the truth. Put our trust in Jesus, the one who was and is to come. Can we begin to build our life upon the solid rock, the unchanging one? Can we begin to build our life upon the Word who became flesh? Come on, can we lift our voices together and sing this? I'll put my trust in you, Jesus. I build my life on you and all that you are.